My ex showed up with my son after 5 years. I demanded a DNA test that showed 0% paternity. But my sister launched a campaign to destroy me publicly, and I almost lost my job. So I sued them both, and what happened left my family shattered. I'm 32 years old. I work in digital marketing for a mid-sized company, and what happened a few months ago literally almost destroyed my career and my relationship with my family. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was dating Kimberly back in 2018, we were young. I was like 25 and she was 24, and honestly, the relationship was good at first, but then it became super toxic. You know, one of those where you fight all the time over stupid things, and eventually you realize you're just not compatible. We broke up on good terms, or so I thought, and we each went on with our lives. There was no drama, no scandals, just a goodbye, and that was it. Years passed. I focused on my career, dated other people, and honestly, Kimberly became a blurry memory from my past, someone I'd shared some time with, but nothing more. My family has always been close, or at least it was before all this. My parents, Joseph and Margaret, have been married for like 35 years, and I have two siblings. Rebecca, who's 2 years older than me, and Alexander, who's 4 years younger. Rebecca was always the most outgoing of the three, very involved in social causes and stuff like that, which is fine, but sometimes she goes overboard with the activism and ends up being kind of extreme in her opinions. Alexander and I were always closer because we share the same interests. Video games, sci-fi movies, that kind of thing. My dad is an accountant and my mom is an elementary school teacher, hardworking, honest people who always taught us values of responsibility and doing the right thing. Everything changed on a random Tuesday in April. I was in my apartment, working from home, had a Zoom meeting in like an hour, when I get a message from an unknown number. I open it, and it's Kimberly. 5 years without knowing anything about her, and suddenly she sends me a message that said, "Hi, Ethan. I know it's been a long time, but I need to talk to you urgently. It's about something very important." I was like, what? After 5 years? Honestly, my first reaction was to ignore it, because I thought maybe she wanted to ask me for money or drag me into some drama. But curiosity got the better of me, and I responded asking what it was about. She said she preferred to talk in person and suggested we meet that same day at a cafe near where I live. Something about her tone made me nervous. I don't know. Like I knew that whatever she wanted to tell me wasn't going to be good. I got to the cafe, and there she was, and she didn't come alone. She had a kid by the hand, a kid who looked about 5 years old or so, with brown hair and green eyes. She greeted me normally, as if 5 years hadn't passed, and then pointed at the kid and said, "Ethan, meet Caleb, your son." I swear I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I stood there like an idiot trying to process what I'd just heard, and all I could say was, "What?" She sat down, asked the kid to go play in the children's area they had in the cafe, and when he left, she explained that she got pregnant right when we broke up, that she didn't tell me at the time because she was confused and scared, and that she tried to raise him alone, but now she's going through financial problems and needs me to take responsibility as a father. I was in total shock, like I couldn't even think clearly. I said, "Kimberly, why are you just now telling me this? Why did you wait 5 years? And she came out with how she'd tried to contact me before, but I'd changed my number, which was a lie because I've had the same number for like 8 years. Then she started talking about how she needed me to give her money monthly for the kid, that she was seeing lawyers to establish formal child support, and basically she was demanding that I take financial responsibility. I told her, wait, I need to process this, and also I need proof of paternity because honestly this is very sudden and weird. She got upset and said how could I doubt her, that the kid was obviously mine, that I just had to look at him to realize it. Honestly, the kid didn't look anything like me. But well, that doesn't mean much because genetics are weird. I insisted that we needed to do a DNA test before talking about anything, and that's when she started making excuses. That it was too expensive, that it was unnecessary, that I was just trying to evade my responsibility. I told her, "Look, it's not personal, but after 5 years without contact I need to be sure, and if the kid is mine, obviously I'm going to fulfill my responsibility, but first I need confirmation." She got pretty angry and left the cafe saying she was going to talk to her lawyers and that I was going to end up paying anyway. I left there with my head spinning, unable to believe what had just happened. The first thing I did was look up information about paternity tests and discovered I could do one without needing her agreement if we got to a legal process. But I hoped not to have to get to that point. For the next 2 weeks, Kimberly bombarded me with messages asking for money, telling me that Caleb needed things for school, clothes, that he had medical appointments, basically trying to pressure me to give her money without the DNA test. I stood firm and told her I wasn't going to give her a single cent until I had the test results. Finally, after a lot of insistence on my part and threats that if she didn't agree I was going to initiate a legal process, she agreed to take the test. We went to a certified lab, they took samples from me and the kid, and they told me the results would be ready in a week. That week was horrible. I couldn't concentrate on work. I wasn't sleeping well. My mind kept going over all the possibilities and how my life was going to change if I turned out to be the father. When the results arrived, I almost had a panic attack before opening them. I read them like 3 times to make sure I was understanding correctly. The probability of paternity was 0%, meaning I was definitely not the father of that child. I felt such great relief that I literally started crying. Not from sadness, but from pure relief. I sent the results to Kimberly by message and told her to stop contacting me and to find the real father. She responded with nothing but insults. That I was a bastard. How could I be so cruel? That the results must be wrong. And I simply blocked her everywhere. I thought that was the end of it, that I could move on with my life and forget about this bizarre episode. But oh surprise, turns out Kimberly and my sister Rebecca were friends on social media. I don't know since when or how they met, and Kimberly went running to tell her version of the story, obviously painting me as the villain. Rebecca called me like 2 days after the results came out, super upset, yelling at me, how was it possible that I was abandoning my son, that I was an irresponsible piece of crap, and me trying to explain to her that we did the DNA test and the kid wasn't mine. She didn't believe me. Told me I must have manipulated the results or was lying. And when I sent her the documentation from the certified lab, she said that didn't prove anything, that men always find ways to evade their responsibility. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like, is my own sister seriously not believing me? I told her she was being irrational and hung up because there was no point continuing to argue with someone who had already decided I was guilty, regardless of the evidence. Things got worse at the next family gathering. It was my mom's birthday, like a month after the whole DNA test thing, and the whole family was at my parents' house. Alexander asked me privately what was up with all the drama because Rebecca had been sending him messages talking bad about me, and I told him the whole complete story, showed him the DNA results, and he believed me immediately and supported me. But during dinner, Rebecca wouldn't stop throwing indirect comments at me about responsibility and men who abandon their children, and I tried to ignore her until she finally exploded and started yelling at me in front of everyone that I was an irresponsible father who was oppressing a single mother. I yelled back that the kid wasn't mine and I had lab proof to demonstrate it, and she said she didn't care, that I should help anyway because Kimberly was in need. My dad got into the argument and told Rebecca to calm down and stop making accusations without foundation, that if I said I had DNA proof, then they had to believe me. Rebecca started crying, saying the family always defended me because I was the favorite son, and they never took her seriously. My mom tried to mediate, saying we should all calm down and not ruin her birthday, but the atmosphere was already super tense. Alexander defended me too and told Rebecca she was being unfair, that he'd seen the documents and it was obvious I had nothing to do with that kid. Dinner ended early, with Rebecca leaving angry and saying we'd see that she was right. I thought that after that Rebecca would eventually calm down and understand. But no. She and Kimberly became like best friends, united in their crusade against me. They started sending me harassing messages, sometimes together, sometimes separately, demanding that I admit my responsibility and give them money. I'd block them on one side and they'd appear on another. They'd create new accounts, send me emails. It was constant harassment. I told them multiple times I was going to sue them if they didn't stop. But I think they thought I was bluffing because not only did they not stop, but they escalated. One day, I was at my office, like mid-morning, when my boss sends me a message telling me to come down to reception urgently. I go down and What do you think I find? Rebecca and Kimberly standing outside the building with a giant sign that said something like, Ethan Reynolds is an irresponsible father who abandons his son, with my photo and everything. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I literally felt like I was in a nightmare. I went out and yelled at them to leave, that they were crazy, and they started yelling at me too in front of all my coworkers who were arriving or leaving for lunch. It was humiliating, super humiliating. I had to call security to get them removed from the property, and they left, but not without first yelling that this wasn't over. My boss called me to his office that same afternoon and told me he understood I had personal problems, but he couldn't allow that to affect the business. That if something like that happened again, he was going to have to consider my permanence at the company. I tried to explain the whole situation to him, showed him the DNA results, but he basically told me he didn't care about my personal dramas, that the only thing that mattered to him was that this didn't interrupt operations again. I left there feeling a mix of rage, humiliation, and panic, because basically they were telling me my job was at risk for something that wasn't even my fault. That night, I talked to Alexander and told him what had happened. He was furious with Rebecca and told me to go talk to our parents so they would intervene. I went to their house the next day and told them everything, including what happened at my work. My dad got super serious and said enough was enough, that he was going to talk to Rebecca and put a stop to this. My mom was more worried about the family relationship and said we had to find a way to resolve this without the family being destroyed. But my dad told her that Rebecca had crossed a line she shouldn't have crossed, and there had to be consequences. My dad called Rebecca and had a strong conversation with her on the phone while I was there. He told her that if she didn't stop harassing and defaming her brother, he was going to stop supporting her financially. And that was important because Rebecca was in college doing a master's degree, and my parents paid her tuition and part of her expenses. She yelled at him that he was choosing his oppressor son over her, that the family was a patriarchy, and I don't know what other things, and my dad simply told her she had a week to apologize to me and promised she was going to stop harassing or she'd lose his support. She hung up. But Rebecca and Kimberly didn't stop. In fact, they escalated. They created a social media page dedicated to exposing irresponsible fathers and put my name, my photo, information about where I worked, everything. They started tagging my company in posts saying they employed a father who abandoned his son. My coworkers started looking at me weird. Some asked me if it was true, and I had to go around explaining over and over that I had DNA proof. But the damage was already done, because you know how people are. They always have doubts even when you show them evidence. It was at that point I decided I couldn't handle this alone anymore and hired a lawyer, Sophia Bennett, who specializes in harassment and defamation cases. I showed her all the messages, the photos of the sign, the social media posts, the DNA results, everything. She told me I had a very strong case, and the first thing we were going to do was send cease and desist letters to both Kimberly and Rebecca, warning them that if they didn't stop immediately, we were going to proceed with a lawsuit for harassment and defamation. The letters were sent certified, so they couldn't say they didn't receive them. You know what they did when they received the letters? They laughed. They literally uploaded photos of the letters to social media, mocking them, saying I was using my privileges to silence a single mother in need. They organized a protest outside my office, not huge, like 15 people they recruited from activism groups on social media, but enough to get attention and cause problems. My boss called me again, and this time he was direct. He told me if this wasn't resolved in a week, they were going to let me go because they couldn't have this type of controversy associated with the company. That same afternoon, Sophia called me and told me it was time to proceed with the formal lawsuit. I was stressed and tired of all this. I'd been dealing with this nightmare for months. But I told her to go ahead, to do what she had to do. She prepared the lawsuit for harassment, defamation, and interference with my work, and we filed it against both of them, Kimberly and Rebecca. They got the notifications, and that's when they started to worry because they realized this was serious. Kimberly was the first to want to negotiate. Her lawyer contacted Sophia like 2 weeks after we filed the lawsuit, saying his client was willing to reach an out-of-court settlement. We met, and basically Kimberly agreed to delete all social media posts, stop contacting me by any means, and pay financial compensation for the damages caused. It wasn't a huge amount, like $8,000, plus my lawyers. legal fees, but the important thing was that it would end. We signed the agreement, and she complied, deleted everything, and I haven't heard from her since then. Rebecca was more complicated. She refused to accept she'd done anything wrong, kept insisting she was defending a victim of patriarchy, and I don't know what else. We went to a conciliation hearing where the judge basically explained to her that if she went ahead with the trial and lost, she was going to have to pay much more in damages and legal costs. That's where she finally broke down, started crying, saying she only wanted to do the right thing, that she thought she was helping me be a better person, a bunch of things that honestly didn't make sense. In the end, she accepted a settlement similar to Kimberly's, but with a larger amount, like $15,000, plus legal fees, because her campaign had been more extensive and damaging. The problem is Rebecca didn't have that money. She was in college and basically lived off what my parents gave her. My dad stood firm that he wasn't going to pay for the consequences of her actions, that she'd made her decisions and now had to face the consequences. But my mom, who's always been softer with her, ended up helping her pay with her personal savings because she didn't want Rebecca to have bigger legal problems. My dad got really angry with my mom about that. They had several strong arguments about it, but in the end, my mom did what she wanted with her own money. Family relationships were left super tense after all this. Rebecca and I don't talk. She never really apologized to me, only did the minimum required by the legal agreement. At family gatherings, when we coincide, we basically ignore each other. My parents are kind of distant from each other because of the whole money thing. My mom feels my dad was too hard on Rebecca, and my dad feels my mom overprotects her and doesn't let her face the consequences of her actions. Alexander continues. Being my best friend and brother, he supported me from beginning to end, and for me that's worth so much. As for my work, I managed to keep it thanks to the harassment stopping after the lawsuits, but my reputation at the office was left kind of tarnished. Some coworkers still look at me weird or make comments, and although my boss no longer threatens to fire me, I feel like he doesn't trust me like before. I'm looking for work at other companies because honestly I want to start over in a place where nobody knows about all this drama. The craziest thing about all this is that Caleb's real father appeared like 6 months after all the mess. Turns out he was a guy Kimberly dated after we broke up, and when he found out she'd accused me, he did his own DNA test, and it came out positive. I found out because Alexander saw it on social media and showed me. The guy is now involved in the kid's life, and from what I could see, he's fulfilling his responsibility. I mean, Kimberly knew, or at least suspected, who the real father was and still decided to come screw with me first. I guess because she thought I was easier to manipulate, or because I had more money than that other guy? I don't know. Looking back, there are moments when I feel guilty. Not for not being the kid's father, because obviously I'm not, but for how all this affected my family. My mom lost a good part of her savings helping Rebecca. My parents are distant. My relationship with my sister is probably permanently destroyed. But at the same time, I don't regret having defended the truth and having demanded that DNA test. If I'd given in to the pressure and accepted what Kimberly said without proof, I'd now be paying for a child who isn't mine and living a lie for the rest of my life. The biggest lesson I got from all this is that always you have to demand proof when someone makes such a serious accusation like that. No matter how much pressure you receive, no matter who gets angry with you, the truth has to be your priority. And I also learned that sometimes family isn't always going to support you even when you're right, and that hurts, but you have to be prepared to stand firm anyway. Rebecca chose to believe a stranger over her own brother without even checking the evidence, and that says more about her than about me. Now I'm 32. Still working at the same company, though. I'm looking for other options. Still single because, honestly, after all this, I'm kind of traumatized with relationships. Alexander comes to my apartment often, and we play video games or watch movies, and those moments are what make me feel like not everything is lost. My parents call me from time to time, more my dad than my mom, and we try to maintain a cordial relationship, but it's not the same as before. Family gatherings are awkward and tense, so I try to avoid them when I can. Sometimes I think about Caleb, the kid, and I hope he's okay, and his real father is good to him. He wasn't to blame for any of this. He was just used as a tool by his mom to try to get money from me. That's the saddest part of all. That there's a kid involved who probably someday is going to find out about this whole story and is going to have to process that his mom tried to attribute his paternity to a stranger. I hope when he grows up, he understands that I didn't reject him specifically, but simply defended the truth that I wasn't his father. I guess life goes on, right? The last few months have been a lot of reflection. A lot of therapy too, because all this affected me mentally more than I want to admit. There are days when I feel angry, others when I just feel tired of everything, and others when I'm at peace with my decisions. What I am clear about is that I'm never again going to allow anyone, family or not, to intimidate me into accepting something I know isn't true. The truth is worth defending, even if it costs you relationships you thought were solid.